Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Testnot channel. Thanks for being here with us again. It is McIntyre month in March. March 2025 right now, so that's our McIntyre month for this year. I'd like to return once again to the roles of the military. Also, once again, I'd like to thank Edward Walsh of the Canadian Expeditionary Force Research Group in Canada. They're dedicated to keeping alive the names of the soldiers and officers in the invaluable contributions and sacrifices they made. Very important work, and I thank you for that, Ted. I've adapted this information for the Touchnot channel's use here, which I do with most things. I write it so I can read it and present it to you how I like to. This is about a man named Robert McIntyre, a World War I soldier. After being wounded 3 times in separate engagements and finally succumbing to devastating wounds during what became known as the Second Battle of Passchendaele, Lieutenant Robert McIntyre was posthumously awarded the Military Cross. This second offensive, so named, was the culminating attack during the Third Battle of Ypres during the First World War. The battle took place in what was called the Ypres Salient area of the Western Front, in and around the Belgian village of Passchendaele, between about October the 26th and the 10th of November in 1917. The Canadian Corps relieved an exhausted Anzac Corps, which was comprised of Australians and New Zealanders. So they moved into this area to give those men a break. Continuing the advance had started with the First Battle of Passchendaele and ultimately captured the village. Beyond gaining favorable observation positions, the battle was intended to gain drier winter positions on higher ground. Now, this particular man, Robert McIntyre, he was born in Glasgow, Scotland in 1885, and he enlisted with the 42nd Battalion Royal Highlanders of Canada at the end of May in 1915, exactly 1 month shy of 30 years old. This is in Montreal he went to enlist. He came there from Philadelphia, USA. Here's something that surprised me and my friends. Less than half of the Canadian Expeditionary Force was Canadian-born at this time, with many American men born still joining the CEF in 1918 rather than the U.S. Army. Interesting. The 42nd Battalion found themselves in England by 19 June of 1915 with a strength of 40 officers and 907 other ranks. Following a summer of training, the battalion arrived in France on 9 September 1915 with the 3rd Division, 7th Brigade, United States Army. Private Robert McIntyre is recorded as being promoted to sergeant near the end of September that year, 15. His battalion had billeted in A Camp on the Renengeist Road following the Battle of Mount Sorrel, and after the roll was called, it was found that the Highlanders had suffered a total of 283 casualties. This is out of their 700 and more. Sergeant McIntyre continued on duty after having been twice wounded and did excellent work and set a splendid example. Only sometime later, the full significance and value of the defense of Sanctuary Wood, the intended target of the battles of Passchendaele, became apparent. Sergeant Robert McIntyre was dangerously wounded and admitted to No. 3 General Hospital in Boulogne on June 14th in 1916 with a gunshot wound to his shoulder, and soon returned to duty on 30 June 1916. He was awarded the Military Medal in the field and was among others reported that year in the newspaper London Gazette. Wounded yet again during the Battle of Flor-Coe-Colette, McIntyre was shipped off to England, convalescing at the Royal Surrey County Hospital in Guildford during the September of 1916 with wounds to his head and arm. The sergeant was appointed temporary lieutenant on 28 April 1917. Now we come to the Second Battle of Passchendaele. The commanders of the 42nd had decided upon a stealth attack and at 2 a.m. on November 3rd, 1917, the attacking force comprised of 7 officers and 200 other ranks, divided into 7 parties, each with a definite task, went into action. In parties number 2 and 3, Lieutenant Robert McIntyre and Lieutenant McCaskill each had 25 men and were tasked to neutralize a number of fortified pillboxes at known coordinates. All 7 parties were in position and moved forward promptly at 2 a.m., the night exceedingly dark and the footing uncertain. The attacking parties came into action almost immediately. Parties 2 and 3 were met by heavy machine gun fire and suffered a number of casualties at the outset. As planned, the Canadians engaged the well-hidden enemy with rifle grenades, resulting in one of the heavy guns falling silent. The first message to get back was received from Lieutenant McCaskill at 2:35 a.m., who reported that all grenades had been fired and that he and McIntyre were attempting to drive the enemy out of the objective points, but so far had been unsuccessful. At that same time, McIntyre signaled by firing 2 green flares aloft, calling for support from the Canadian trench mortars known as Stokes, set up and ready at the rear where the advance had begun only a short time earlier. The sight of the sergeant's flares did bring a barrage of rockets. These had been notoriously plagued by short fuses and exploded much too high overhead of the German positions to have any effect. About this time, it is surmised that McIntyre sustained several severe wounds from which he subsequently died. Very little information came back regarding any of the other parties apart from those of Lieutenant McIntyre and McCaskill. It was later apparent that only 2 of those 7 groups had reached and completed their objective in that early morning's darkness. Per Ardua, through difficulty. And that's Clan McIntyre for McIntyre Month in March on the Touchknot channel. Please stay with us and stay on the trail of the Touchknot channel. Please subscribe, my friends. Thank you.